Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers and hope you're having a nice weekend. Later, the folks from SOAR talk about their efforts to help flood victims in eastern Kentucky, still an ongoing issue in our viewing area. But first, school bells are ringing. Classes are beginning for a brand new year. How safe are our schools here in Kentucky? The horrible shooting in Uvalde, Texas raised all kinds of questions about school security and how to respond nationwide. More importantly, how to prevent such nightmares. Kentucky law now requires an armed officer at every school, but many districts are unable to comply with that rule right now. Jon Akers is a former high school principal who runs the Kentucky Center for School Safety based at Eastern Kentucky University. He joins us. Also here is the state security marshal. The marshal is Ben Wilcox. He is with us. Also has quite a background as a school security officer. Gentlemen, welcome. We appreciate you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
You know, as the new school begins, John, the situation in Texas is still on the minds of parents and teachers. Is there reason to believe that in America we have learned a lot from that issue, in that situation that happened, and maybe things are a little bit less likely to play out the way they did there?
Most definitely. We've learned lessons from Columbine, from Sandy Hook, and from Uvalde and all the others areas. Each time we pick up something new, and when the Uvalde situation occurred, one of the first things that came to us were the legislators saying, what can we do differently? And they said, well, we've done this for the last 3 years. We passed the School Safety Resiliency Act, and we've been implementing it for 3 years. And so we feel like we're better today than we ever have been. Are we perfect? The answer is always no to that, but we're sure further down the road than most places around our country.
Ben, your thoughts on where things are right now?
Well, I completely agree with John. You know, the passing the School Safety and Resiliency Act in 2019 gave the school so many tools to assist in school safety. Created our office where we go in and actually do assessments on schools. Starting our fourth assessment this year. We've already been in the schools for 3 years, and is working directly with the schools, not only making sure that the schools are following the mandates of the law, but also being a resource for the schools when it comes to school safety and security, and directly working with the Kentucky Center for School Safety to make that happen.
Are those assessments required, or is that request of a district?
No, that is required. Our school assessments are required. We have on-site assessments of all locally controlled schools in the state of Kentucky.
Fair to say that you come down on the enforcement end and you're more on the prevention end, but together, hopefully this all works to make the schools safer, right?
Yeah, and and I think that was the design of the General Assembly, to have a compliance agency from the Department of Criminal Justice Training to do that access control assessments, and ours, where when Ben's group finds some things that they need training on or whatever, we will provide that. So it's a hand-in-glove situation.
Many schools have said they cannot comply with that law right now. They can't find the officers, or in some cases they can't afford the school resource officers. You have some good news in regard to how many schools are now in compliance, and you won't tell us the ones that are not.
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. And we do have some good news. We've seen an increase of 21% more SROs hired in the last 3 months since the passing of the law. That puts us over 50% of the school campuses in the state of Kentucky covered by SROs. So the obstacles obviously are manpower or hiring, and then also funding. But seeing that increase so quick in school districts and the police departments and sheriff's office going out and looking for SROs, and we're getting some hiring done, it's very positive.
You've publicized that, and you've also kind of widened the net some, right, in terms of who you're trying to recruit to be those school resource officers.
Well, you know, and that's one of the things, is that you can't just put anybody in school as a school resource officer. You've got to have the right people, and it seems like we're getting a lot of the right people coming forward to be SROs. A lot of folks are maybe retired and coming back to work, or have a lot of experience on the street or experience in the schools, and are coming in. And of course, the training we provide at the Department of Criminal Justice Training is really the icing on the cake. That's 120-hour certification for all SROs in the state. And that's not just police work. That's trauma-informed care. That's working with students with special needs. Because SROs are really a specialized unit. more though than any other specialization that I know of, and I've got a career in law enforcement, is that it just takes the right people to do it, and I think the state of Kentucky is leading that pack of putting the right people into the schools.
And yet you've had a challenge with getting young people interested in that job, right? They want more action on the street, so to speak.
Well, I don't know about that. We're getting a lot of retired officers coming in because it does maybe fit some of the things that they're looking for, but at this point it's hard to hire anybody right now. You know, people are looking for teachers, people are looking for police officers, but we've got a lot of young SROs as well.
And Bill, something I wanted to add to that is that there's a frustration that I have in my office is that the public sometimes thinks that any time that there's a police officer in a school that they are an SRO. That's not necessarily the situation there. It's a situation where maybe there's something that's happened on campus and they call for help from outside where they don't have an SRO. Then something bad happens, then all of a sudden SROs are bad guys because they made a poor judgment situation like that. What Ben's talking about, that these folks are sworn officers of the law first, then they go through 120 extra hours of training to learn how to work in the schools with those topics that Ben was talking about. So just a police officer in a school doesn't necessarily mean that they're an SRO. And so we want to make that that delineation quite clear.
We're learning that more schools are going ahead and forming their own police departments,
yes.
right? Is that a trend you suspect will continue?
I think we're going to see a trend in that, and I think a lot of times the schools look at that. There's a little bit more control with the officers. The officers will work maybe 180 or 190 days, just like a teacher would. They give an opportunity for a little bit more jurisdiction for the officers to working within the schools, and as they create their own department, then they get an opportunity to apply for grants and things of that nature, having a police department, so they could apply for more officer grants and things of that nature.
I want to get each of you to respond to this. What about the role of students and parents themselves in trying to make schools safe, reporting what they see or suspect? How important is information in preventing tough situations in schools?
Absolutely critical, Bill, absolutely critical. If you do the math, like Ben was just talking, our schools are in session for about 175 days a year. We have the kids for 7 hours a day, so that constitutes about 15% of a calendar year. So we only have them from theoretically 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock during those days. If something's going on in the communities or in the neighborhoods, whatever, we need to be told that they see something, or if you hear something, say something thing. We have a tip line, a state stop tip line that we advocate on, that we get this information, or they could always call the school law enforcement groups that Ben was talking about, or the principal group, whatever. But if we can get ahead of the curve when it comes to issues like this, that helps us out. So when the parents have these kids 85% of the time, we need their help, period. We really need their help. Ben?
And that's the thing, is it takes everyone for safety. If we want to be 100% safe all the time, we have to use all our resources. And parents talking to kids, finding out what their fears are, finding out what's going on at school. Sometimes we have to ask. Our kids aren't just going to come home and just tell us. We have to ask about those things. And, with school shooters or critical incidents, we know that there's been leakage, is what we call it, is that people have heard about things that are happening. And, finding that out and then using the tip line that we have in the state of Kentucky, or contacting your school and telling them, talking to a counselor, that these are all things that we have to do as families, as schools, as law enforcement. Everybody has to be able to do that.
Do you think schools do a good job in keeping those avenues open so that the students do feel confident in coming forward and feel that they can share information?
Absolutely. I think they do a fantastic job. With the advent of the School Safety and Resiliency Act that add trauma-informed teams, which added threat assessment teams, there's counselors. We're trying to get more counselors into the schools. We've got a lot of counselors in the schools. Those folks make it, I think, easier for the kids to come forth. But, the law requires that we have at least one adult in each school that is connected to a student. A student can connect that adult. And making sure those adults are open to that is critical. And I think we're doing a good job of making sure that that custodian that knows that kid real well knows that they can talk to them and help them when necessary.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean a student has to be able to connect with an adult?
Within the School Safety and Resiliency Act,
okay.
Our goal is to make sure that there is one adult for every kid, that a kid can go have a trusted adult in that school. And that may not be a teacher, that may not be the principal, that may not be the counselor, that may be the lunch lady, that may be the bus driver. What we want is to foster a a school that if a kid needs to talk to somebody, they have that trusted adult to go talk to, maybe a school resource officer. When I was a school resource officer, I had many students that trusted me and would come talk to me and could relate to me, and that's just more people to talk and hear and see what's going on. And really, we really need to know what kids fear, and talking to them and understanding that makes school safer when we can address those issues.
And that's a goal, to get one adult to every kid. We do assessments ourselves. That's more of a climate culture piece. Ben's is more the physical plant side of this thing. And we're finding that elementary, most of the kids have somebody they can go to. Middle school, it wanes a little bit. It's about 85% to 90% of the kids can go to an adult. The high school, it drops down to about 80%. And so when we do these assessments, we've assessed over 1,200 schools in our state, we're saying you need to pick up a little bit more in that area with your adults, connecting with these kids a little bit more. And we don't want them to be buddies, but we want them to be that trusted adult that Ben was talking about that they can go to in time of need.
How is it known when that connection is made? I mean, how how is there a record that this student has an adult?
I don't know if you can keep a record of that, other than teaching your staff that that's what they're there for. I look at it this way, before a child even walks into a school and goes into the room with their teacher, they run into a whole lot of staff. They run into their bus drivers. They run into their, the cafeteria workers. They run into their counselor. They may run into a custodian. Having that open relationship makes a school very, very safe because of the relationships there.
We've talked about this before. Some who lash out indicate that they have been bullied in school in some way. Social media makes that so much more easy to do. It's a different world than when we all went to school, right? Are things improving or getting worse in that regard?
I think it's getting worse. I think the invention of social media, like you said a minute ago, has moved this from the schoolhouse to 24/7 online. And it's so difficult for school administrators to get in and help kids that are being bullied unless we are told about it, because sometimes kids won't report it. And so that gets to be an issue. We want parents and kids to report it to us, but there's another issue here. If the kid's being bullied at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, school administrators have a very gray area that we can get in there and talk with the kids and stuff. So the bottom line here is that the more information that we can get on who's being bullied, who's being harassed, the better off we can get after it. But again, oftentimes we don't know. It's not reported to us as school administrators.
Ben, that has to be tough, because on the one hand you want to tell the student don't pay any attention to that and go on with your life. At the same time, there may be information contained in that that could prevent something from happening.
I think that also goes back to parents being involved with their kids and knowing what's happening on that social media. That when kids get bullied on social media, they may withdraw. Well, we need to find out what's happening so we can bring that out, because it can only get worse. And so again, having everybody involved in that makes it much more safe.
And that has another issue there too, that if the kid reports that I'm being bullied on my cell phone, sometimes parents will pull that cell phone away from the kid. And then that umbilical cord that goes to their social connections with their kids has been cut off. And so sometimes kids won't make that be known to their parents because they don't want to lose their devices.
We saw the National Guard respond so remarkably during the floods, the rescues that nobody knew they were capable of, kind of thing. But that's an area where they had trained and drilled and knew what to do if something like that ever came up, though we hoped it wouldn't, but it did. Is that the kind of what-if training that also needs to and does go on in schools?
Absolutely. Per the School Safety and Resiliency Act, the Department of Criminal Justice Training puts out training on, we'll just say, active shooter response. And it's an hour training that all staff that has connection with students or work with students has to watch. What we want to do is take that hour's worth of training and make a plan. We want we want staff and teachers and everyone to sit down and say, if something happens, this is what we're going to do. Because if you do have a critical incident at a school, that's when your emotions are heightened, and not having a plan is when you kind of crumble. But if you have that plan, you have something to come back to, and I think that's so important. That's what we push out to the schools here in the state of Kentucky.
And we just don't look at school shooters, we look at natural hazards, man-made hazard issues. We have like 28 things that we have in our schools' emergency operating plans that address each one of those issues. And so this is one part of it that catches probably 90% of the media's attention on that, but a missing child may not be something like that, or a hazmat spill or things like this that could have eventually affect a school in one form or fashion. So this is the one piece that is the most critical one because of the tragedies that can occur with a person coming in with a gun.
And that's the connection that the Office of the State School Security Marshal and the Kentucky Center for School Safety have. You know, when we started going in and looking at emergency plans and things like that, we don't have time to sit down and go through. We just see you have them. Well, we look at them and say, these need to be updated, these need to be fixed, you need to call Kentucky Center for School Safety. His group can come in and work on those, and we're seeing phenomenal emergency plans because of that collaboration that we have and getting those plans together. And over a 3-year period of time of going in and checking every year, we're seeing a lot better emergency plans, which makes us very happy.
Going forward now, does there need to be more legislation, maybe money for security officers, or what changes do you see in the months and the year ahead?
I would say we have a pretty good base as far as the law is concerned, as far as school safety is concerned. I would think, I use two terms. One is compliance and one is commitment. So moving schools from we got to do the drills to where we want to do the drills, where we're teaching kids what we call situational awareness. Know your surroundings. It just doesn't happen when the 3 o'clock bell rings. They need to be concerned about possible shootings in their churches. They need to be concerned about malls. They need to be concerned about theaters and whatever. So we want to teach kids to be safe no matter where they go. And so I think those are areas that we can take. We already have the structure for that. It's just a question of doing a better job at implementing that. We're really better today than we were 3 years ago, but down the road here we hope to be even a little bit better so that people are more committed to this.
And we're seeing that commitment. You know, it's not a checkbox. After 3 years, it's a commitment to do these things. And that's what makes us so proud about the state of Kentucky and the staff and the teachers and everybody that's involved, is that we're getting that commitment level. They know when we come in what we're looking for, and it makes our job a lot easier when we're doing our assessments.
Oh, very good. Let's hope for a safe school year ahead. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
We'll hear from the folks from SOAR. They're trying to help out in Appalachia with the flooding situation out there. We're coming back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We welcome you back to Kentucky Newsmakers. It's been a month now since the awful flooding hit eastern Kentucky, but it will be many more months before the region will begin to resemble anything close to normal. The toughest part is that eastern Kentucky was already dealing with profound challenges before this 1,000-year flood. SOAR, which stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region, was working before the floods and is ramping up its efforts to improve the region after the flooding. They've even established a fund just for K-12 students. Joining us today, SOAR's Chief Operating Officer, Joshua Ball. Joshua, thanks so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bill.
First, let's just talk about how big of a setback the floods are to the forward momentum that you were attempting to build in eastern Kentucky. There was excitement. We hope that that can return fairly quickly, right?
Yeah, Bill. I think the key word there is hope, and looking at the numbers of the FEMA declared counties, you had a poverty rate of about 27% on average, which is almost three times the national average. So many of the folks that directly were impacted by the flooding were already living paycheck to paycheck and dealing with very, very, very difficult situations financially, but also within their homes and their structures, and it's just utterly devastating to look at the communities and just see so many people hurting. But the flip side of that is also seeing the resiliency of really what community means, and Eastern Kentuckians and Kentuckians taking care of one another, and that has been a bright spot in a very dark past 30 days.
Well, hats off to the people in the region for, as you said, having that much stick-to-itness, and how heartening has it been for people in the region to see that the rest of the state does care and values the mountain region. Do you think that's been important to folks there?
Absolutely, Bill. And, when the devastating tornadoes happened in western Kentucky, I think we all remember the caravan of school buses, heading west with supplies and people, and that was returned as soon as this happened. And, we realized that there may be things we disagree with passionately when it comes to topics of the day, but when it comes to helping one another, Kentuckians and Eastern Kentuckians always step up, and I think we saw it really within hours of the flood happening. You saw churches ramp up, schools ramp up, nonprofits, and that's really what we started to do at SOAR, was really work as that collective backbone to support any and all efforts, but also place a distinct focus on a lot of the small mom and pop businesses that were directly impacted by the flood, and really help them figure out what was next for them as they navigate the process of bank loans, SBA loans, and looking at long-term recovery.
What has that been like to kind of wrap your arms around some of those small business folks and say there's going to be a tomorrow?
It's tough, Bill, to be honest with you. Like a lot of small businesses across America, not just in Appalachia, it's tough being a small business. It's you live in sometimes paycheck to paycheck, day to day sometimes, and so it was really important for us as an organization to begin to work collaboratively with our partners. So, oftentimes when you're dealing with a natural disaster, any type of situation, there is so much information out there, and it's just so hard for those directly impacted to navigate it. So what we did at SOAR was work with our partners, specifically our CDFIs, which are Community Development Financial Institutes, and the Foundation for Appalachia, Kentucky, to streamline some of the emergency loans that were available, and also the grants that were available. So all 7 of our organizations worked. That's the Small Business the Small Business Bill. Are we live?
Yes, go ahead. Keep going.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What we did is we brought 7 nonprofits together, and we began to streamline information about emergency loans and grants. So instead of a business owner having to deal with 7 different organizations to see what was a fit, we centralized all of that information in one location, and we worked in the communities on the ground to relay that information and help businesses apply for loans and grants. So you've got the Small Business Development Center in Kentucky, you have Community Ventures, Southeastern Kentucky Economic Development Corporation, the Mountain Association, and SOAR.
And I know you have most of those organizations. You have a link on your website for folks to get to those.
Yes, well. Absolutely, and that was really part of the strategy, was to centralize that so that people could access it online, and then while we were on the ground, be able to hand that information to people as well.
Joshua, let me ask you this. You're also encouraging people to support school students in a separate fund that you put together, and that has taken off pretty well.
Yeah, it has. Really, in the first 10 days of the fund, we were able to raise over $60,000. More importantly, we were able to get that money out the door. And right now, the need is within schools. There were a lot of schools that were destroyed, and some that had partial damage. And we're really working to help replace some of the technology loss that they had, be it networking, laptops, Chromebooks, things like that. But we know the need is going to shift in the coming months, and unfortunately, Bill, years, for students as they transition to different forms of housing. So this fund really helps fill some of the gaps of bedding, computers, printers, internet access, appliances as students and their families begin to transition to different forms of housing. So this fund is intended to be here for a while, and it's really intended to help meet the needs of students so that we can do everything we can in this difficult situation to make sure that students do not fall through the cracks, and that as difficult as it is, we try to put everything in front of them to be successful.
So I know that SOAR attempts to plan a more prosperous road ahead for 54 counties, nearly the eastern half of Kentucky, essentially. Your goal, it sounds like, is to try your best to make this a detour, not a dead end for people, and let them know that there will be continued efforts to make people whole, and that hopefully they'll be able to stay in the eastern Kentucky region.
Yeah, Bill, that was essentially why we were formed, and we truly believe that there is a future in Appalachia, and as tough as it seems today for a lot of our counties, there is a brighter tomorrow on the horizon, and it's tough to see that now. But the people of Appalachia, Kentucky, the people of Central Appalachia, specifically Eastern Kentucky, we have faith, grit, perseverance, and we are resilient. And I think The nation has been able to see that with some of the coverage. The state's been able to see that. And the people of Eastern Kentucky, we will rebuild. And I think it's important that we use this rebuilding opportunity, to make sure that the 1,700 plus homes that were totally destroyed and the more than 4,000 that are partially destroyed, that we not only help our friends and neighbors rebuild, but we do it in a way that really mitigates this from happening again, making sure that we get folks homes that are that are affordable, that have proper weatherization and things like that. And we're thrilled to see that conversation happening. But housing is by far the most urgent issue when you think of 1,700 homes destroyed and more than 4,000 partially destroyed. In a rural area,
right.
that is utterly devastating.
Well, there's a $212 million state flood relief package that's coming as far as additional assistance, and we're all hopeful that will be put to good use and is appropriately spent. Quickly, as we wrap up here, the SOAR Summit is coming up in Pikeville, October 19th and 20th, and you're going back to Corbin next year. I'm sure you getting together is very important for the SOAR folks.
Yeah, it always is, and we've got an agenda online, and registration is open, and we're expanding the summit to 2 full days, and we're also offering focus sessions with workshops and subject matter experts, and we will be announcing some programming specifically to flooding and the long-term relief and planning efforts in the coming days and weeks. So that is going to be a topic, and we look forward to having a good conversation and bringing the people of Appalachia, Kentucky together to celebrate where we're at and talk about where we want to go.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much. Stay with us. We'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers. One of our scheduled guests next week will be Kentucky Education Commissioner Dr. Jason Glass. That is Kentucky Newsmakers. Thank you for joining us, and make it a good week ahead.